Hello, everybody. Hello, Murat. Greetings to Turkey. Thank you again for having you in our show. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Murat. Nice to meet you again. Hello, Armin.
It's very nice to see you again, and with a better internet connection this time. I hope it's not the acute phase of the pandemic, and I don't think that the Wi-Fi will be too overloaded. So I hope the connection will be better, and everything will be understood better.
But as you said just before, you had snowstorms and thunderstorms.
Yeah.
Again, we had this last time.
Istanbul is facing a stormy weather with a lot of snow. And as I told you before, just a few minutes ago, before we connected, the lack of infrastructure of such a big city with almost 20 millions of population sometimes occur problems. And anyway, we survived the night. So we will see, but it's okay for most of us.
Okay, very good.
I saw it in the news, a lot of snow in Greece and in Turkey and so on.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Even here in Malta, we had the coldest night I live here since 9 years, and the first time we had only 7 degrees in the morning. Normally, it rarely goes under 10 degrees.
Cold for Malta, isn't it? It's cold for Malta.
It's really cold.
But it is said that such a stormy snowfall didn't happen since 1942 in Istanbul.
Okay, wow.
The climate is generally mild, although we see snow almost every year, but this it was quite extraordinary.
You know, that's climate change.
Yeah, most probably.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I saw a nice reportage today of a guy of Weltwoche or something. It's a magazine in Switzerland, and he said, I checked now, we have average the last 9 years temperature dropped average of about the last 9 years. So all this global warming still doesn't really work, as the politicians say.
There are a lot of speculations. Some scholars say that it is just a phase that also passed in the history. So there were some dry periods, hot periods, and cold periods. And it's
of course, you always have that.
Yeah. I don't deny climate change, of course, not because the climate is changing since the Earth is existing. Of course, sometimes it's ice age, or sometimes it's a warm period.
Yeah, because the Earth is flat,
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it always swivels around.
And first of all, the Illuminats are steering the weather. They have a little button and they make it warmer.
They have a big button, and the system is called HARP, but this is something different.
Yeah.
We don't talk about this today. We talk about archery, please, okay?
Yeah.
That's why we are here, right?
Yeah.
But just because I saw last time a video, you shot now a Selçuk bow, right?
Yes.
It looks a little like the Kazan is some kind of longer than from the Turkish or the Sipahi. It looks a little different.
First of all, let's talk about the morphology of the bow first.
Okay.
So because Kazan is an inaccurate term. Kazan is the name of the limb extremities of the Ottoman style bows.
Okay, only from the Ottoman. Okay.
Can be seen also on the Crimean Tatar bows, which is that ridge with a with a triangular cross section, and at the very tip there's a part which is called bash in Turkish. Bash is head, actually, where the loops of the strings is accepted or held. So the earlier bows are similar to that of Kipchak, Kuman, or early Hungarian bows, Magyar bow. Instead of Kazan and Bash, there is a rigid limb extremity called ear. So we also discussed with Adam Karpovich about this naming of the bow sections. So because there's a term coming from Arabic language, siyah, but siyah actually refers to different things depending on the era of the particular bow, because beforehand, there were these kind of bows with these ears, unbendable, rigid extremities.
Okay.
And afterwards, maybe at the late 13th or mid 14th century, somewhere there, the Kazan appeared, and it, of course, changed the ballistics of the bow as well. So this bow belongs to that earlier bows as for the morphology, similar to that of the Magyar bows, for example. And unfortunately, there isn't any remained example. So that's why Selçuk, our member, whose name is also Selçuk, so he was named after the founder of this dynasty. So Selçuk is still a boy's name in modern Turkey. So Selçuk developed this Selçuk bow, and by following the miniatures seen in the Selçuk era, so 13th century, 12th century. Unfortunately, these miniatures, of course, it's not as realistic as the European Renaissance painting. So some gaps should have been filled, of course, but we tried to be as accurate and as evidence-based as possible. So I gave a hand to, although I just played a very minor role, I have to admit, so Selçuk did it. And then he was so careful, which I really appreciated, that he gave some prototypes to some of us to be used, in fact, to torture. We really tortured the balls. We shot light arrows, like Majora arrows, for example. It's a laminated bolt. It's not a very good idea to go very low in arrow mass, but we did. It was the idea actually to see the durability of the bow. And after a little bit more than a year, he said, okay, we can carefully introduce the bow to the market.
Wow, okay, so, nice.
He is now becoming a professional bowyer, but he was actually an idealist.
Okay.
Than the bowyer. So then the bow has been in use in more than 3 years, I think, if we consider the time that we had behind during the pandemic. So it's a great bow, actually, and we are comparing its ballistic features as well with that of the later bows, the Ottoman bow and the Crimean Tatar bow. And here, as I said in the video, some scholars and good friends of mine helped us. For example, Dr. Gabor Solosi, a Hungarian gentleman, a good friend and a mentor. He also sent me some very valuable archaeological data from that the Hungarian archaeologists harvested from the tombs and graves of Magyars and Avars. So they were very valuable just because although there wasn't any interest in tombs, the Carpathian climate causes, of course, because of the humidity, rain, and everything, there's no intact example. They decomposed, but still there were skeletons as well as quivers. So they had the chance to compare the height of the bodies next to the bows and the quivers. So that had an idea how long the arrows were. And it's the same with the Göktürk or Blue Turk Khaganate era, which was very well researched by the Soviet archaeologists. And the Blue Turks survived up to 840, so just 150 years before the Selçuks arose as a sultanate. So, and this type of bow can be tracked back to Shinnuz in Ural Altaic region, so as old as 3rd century BC. So it's a long design, and then intact example is from 8th century, the so-called Jargalan bow.
Heard of it.
And yes, and another very good a big chance that I have in my hand is thanks to Adam Karpovich. Again, as I said in the video, he actually made 2 replicas of this Jargalan bow, and one of them was kindly shipped by him to me. So I have the bow here, 80-something pounder, by following the dimensions of the originals found in the archaeological excavations, the bow came out to be 80 plus, 90 plus pounds of weight.
Yep.
And all these data together makes a bow that is quite durable, maybe not as fast as the later Ottoman and Crimean Tatar bows, but very durable and is energy efficient with heavier arrows. That's what heavy arrows and longer draws.
Okay.
This has not been confirmed by the research of the Hungarian enthusiasts like Gabor Solosi, because they didn't draw the bow long. They unfortunately tested it with shorter draws, but longer draw plus a heavy arrow make the bow approach the energy efficiency levels of the later bows. So I think it's a theory, of course, but further research may confirm that. It shows that these bows had similar energy transfer capabilities if they're drawn long and heavier arrows are shot. Of course, it will shorten the distance of combat, but it is okay because they all were mounted, or almost all were mounted, because there are the famous Orhun inscriptions, the earliest known example of the Turkish language and alphabet. There, it is mentioned that 1/3 of the army consisted of pedestrians or infantry. All the others, 2/3, were mounted. So most of them were mounted, and on a mount, on a horse, you can adjust distance between you and the enemy. So a heavier arrow and a deep trajectory may not be a big disadvantage. So anyway, we are still searching the stuff. But it was a good start. Yes, and if you ask my opinion, it is also a very important and unfortunately underestimated era. Again, because of the political reasons. I don't want to get into politics too much.
No. We never do that.
Oh, I like it.
Anyway, but of course, because of conjunctural reasons, this era is a little bit underestimated or ignored, while the Ottoman period is much more emphasized. But the Seljuk era is very important in terms of being a transitional period from the pagan time to the Islamic time.
Sorry, and this is the Seljuk area, Seljuk time.
Yes, it is from 1040 to approximately the late 13th century.
Okay.
Anyway, the bow, as I said, has been tested by 2 or 3 Tirandaz members, including me. I also shot one for years, and I have now the second one for bow hunting purposes, just because the bow is provided with a yellowish, brownish back, which is reflecting the light in low light conditions, even in low light conditions. So that's why I requested Seljuk to make one for me with black fiberglass backing. So it's a great bow, and just for curiosity, I checked the bow's kinetic energy by using a heavy arrow, not that heavy in fact, because in testing we went up to 14 grain per pound. But in hunting, I would not use such a very heavy bow in case I would need to shoot at a slightly longer distance. So with, I think, 11 grain per pound or so, the bow, it's a 55-pound bow, by the way, reached 38 to 40 foot-pound of energy, which is the given minimum for black bear and wild boar, which is quite good, very good. In fact, that hunters can reach with compound bows.
Interesting.
So for such a, let's say, earlier, yes?
It's close to a longbow. It sounds it's close to a long. It's close the performance of a longbow.
Well, you mean longbow or a longer bow? Which one?
Longbow. He speaks about the hill style.
A straight limbed bow. But I'm just picking on you.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, and it was a first, in fact. So I'm very proud of that too. That we actually could a member of us actually could do that.
Yeah.
And now some other important lawyers, for example, like Lucas Navani, is also introducing a new prototype of a Selçuk
I
bow.
saw it. He finished the design already. In 2 weeks, he is ready.
Well, but of course, it does not underestimate his skill and talent. He's a great guy, not only as a bowler, as an archer. He's an excellent archer too. I have been together with him in Poland in some competitions. His accuracy is unbelievable.
Yeah.
So a great guy as well. So I am really happy that people knows more and more about the Turkey culture other than the Ottomans. So it's good. You know why? Because of course I don't want to look chauvinistic, but it is important to write the history correct. When I am reading the English literature, and if it comes to the Crusader era, it is all about these Saracens, okay? The Crusaders fought the Saracens. But the Saracens, there's no such a homogeneous folk called Saracens. So, of course, the Christianity and Islam were two camps, fought each other. But these Saracens were different in terms of their races, in terms of their languages, in terms of their other customs. And the first encounter of the Crusaders was the Turks, the Selçukians. So it is very important. We wrote an article together with Niels Visser, a Dutch friend of mine, for a magazine, Medieval Warfare. It is being published in Holland, in the Netherlands. And it was really good. We wrote it together based on another previous article of mine about Selçuk archery. And I highlighted that once again. So it is not about, as I said, being chauvinistic, but being accurate.
Exactly, that's all about
And all what is mentioned about. Let me close the window. Maybe you can hear the voice as well.
No problem.
Crowded, noisy city. And all what the Crusader reports mention about the skill of the Saracens in archery, it's mainly about the Turkish archery. So it is a matter of not only being accurate in historiography, but also being aware of the sources. Because, for example, the military elite of the Caliph's armies were of Turkic origin and Circassian origin. So this Saracen was mainly Turkish. So that's why also a good source for us to work on, like the Memluk archery. And this is also something good in order to pull people's attention to this culture. So you may remember in our previous interview, we talked about the categorization of the bows, whether the Crimean Tatar bows are different. Well, they are not. They are the bows of the Turkish bow family. So it's the same for Memluk.
And are there a lot of findings? You hear me?
We hear you, yeah.
Are there a lot of findings of these Selçuk bows? Are there lots of?
No, unfortunately not. Unfortunately not. The problem is, unlike the Ottoman culture, because we have a lot of intact Ottoman bow examples. A lot. In the Palace Museum, there are over 530 bows, which I was lucky enough to see.
Wow.
And in other museums, as well as in museums in Europe, there are a lot of.
Even in Austria, from the Turkish wars, from the Ottoman wars. Yeah.
Yes. What was the museum in Vienna?
In Forchtenstein Castle. It's close to my place. It's a castle in Burgenland where I live, and they have a big display of stuff they got from the Ottoman, invaders. A big tent, a Turkish officer's tent, and bows and stuff and shields and sabers and so on.
in Karlsruhe and Dresden in Germany, there are important findings, and in Poland, in Warsaw, in the military museum, there are great findings based on the booties taken by Polish army after the defeat of Ottomans in Austria in the siege of Vienna. So there are a lot of examples, but not from the Seljuk era. So that's why our Seljuks research was based on the depictions. There are fortunately depictions, not too much, but there are. And of course, there were some collateral information, let's say. For example, I am referring to the Hungarian bows, for example, because they are the same type of bows as for the cultural identity. When they came to the Carpathian Basin, the Seljuks came towards Anatolia, almost to the north of India, which was ruled by another Turkish dynasty at that time, Ghaznavids. So they are they lived and ruled at the same period of time and used similar weaponry as would be expected. So that's why we are also using this kind of collateral information to try to find out how the design really was. Of course, until we find an intact example, they all are inaccurate. We have to admit that.
And because you talk about that term Saracens, which was created in our Western world, I think it's like, yes, they just called all these people, these Muslim people, maybe they are their enemies, Saracens back then, as they called these earlier ones, the Moors, the Moors which invaded Spain and so on. But
those are Arabs. So the culture of Indonesia was founded by the Arabs who came to the Spanish land earlier than the Turks adopted Islam. So this is Arabic, not Turkish. So even the Turkish influence on the Arabic military culture started after 8th century, not beforehand. So because the slave, the prisoners of war of Turkic and Caucasian origin became generals and the other high-rank military elite of the Caliph's armies. And then they rebelled and take over the power. So they founded states like the Mamluk state. So that's why the influence of the Turkish warfare and Turkish weaponry came a little bit later than that of Indonesia. Indonesia was Arabic.
I also think it's very difficult to separate all these, because you say Hungarian archery and Turkish, and if you think about how connected these cultures were back then, it's it's not easy to differentiate between all this. Let's say how you call it? How is it called? Close Eastern archery culture,
Near East.
Near East. And on the other hand, I want to say, I don't know if the Arabs themselves, what the Crusaders' enemies were, if they had a special archery culture. I don't know. I don't know if the Western African and Arabs, if they had a special archery culture. I don't know.
They certainly had an archery culture, because there are some legendary heroes in the Islamic oral tradition. For example, the Ottoman archers consider Abu Sad bin Waqqas as their, what is that called in English? Their legendary founder. Actually, because the archers were considered to be a profession, and each and all profession had a legendary leader, a founder. And the Ottoman archers, although they originated from Inner Asia, and in fact their archery culture wasn't something to do with the Islamic culture, but they somehow put a new dress on their older culture with their new religion. So that's why this legendary founder of the profession of archery was Ebu Sa'd bin Waqqas, who is reportedly a very successful archer and a brother-in-arm of the Prophet Muhammad. And according to the legend, in one of the early wars Muhammad fought, one of the arrows that Sa'd bin Waqqas shot could have not been found after the war, after the battle. And according to the legend, this arrow is still in the sky and will be flying up to the apocalypse. So that's why this flight archery was considered to be a very important sportive activity in the Islamic world, based on this oral tradition.
Interesting.
Yes, very, very good. Of course, these kind of oral traditions, legends, tales are also very, how to say, brilliant, attractive. But they are accurate. It's discussable. For example, a friend of us, a very important Tirendaz member, Harun Deniz, recently released an article that we published on our website. Unfortunately, it is in Turkish for now, but we are planning to publish it with an English translation.
Great.
It is about the roots of flight shooting. And although there is such an Islamic dress, let's say, the origins can be found in the Inner Asia and in the cosmology of the old religion. So the bow was like the dome of sky, and the string was like the ground where people live. And under the ground, there is the underworld, the world that we live, and the sky where the deities or the good spirits live. So, for example, the shaman is the individual, is the person who can travel between these worlds, and shaman uses two tools during these trips. One of them is drum, the other one is a bow. So therefore, bow has a religious meaning, and shooting an arrow in the sky has a meaning too, because in this old animist religion, there were a lot of deities, but the chief of these deities, let's say the chief god of the pantheon, sky god, Gök Tanrı, or Kök Tengri, as it was called, or it was pronounced in old times. Now we say Gök Tanrı, it was pronounced Kök Tengri. It's just a change in the last 1,000 years. So because the chief god of the pantheon was considered to be the sky of God, shooting an arrow to the sky was important, or that shaman's spirit was shot into the sky with the bow he was using as a ritual object was also important. So that's why the flight archery has probably different roots before Islam. Although it is not very easy to talk about such things, it is actually something to be considered, to focus on, to really understand absolute truth, let's say.
You get a lot of messages. Look at this.
These are all his girlfriends.
Yeah.
Calling in. Murat, where are you? Murat, where are you?
We miss you.
We miss you.
Now we don't hear you.
We don't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No, now we hear you.
Now it's okay. Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah.
Okay. With these jokes, you're gonna make my wife kill me.
Oh,
yeah.
We're only joking.
No, the female followers, let's say, exactly. All this interested in Ottoman history and so on. Yeah. Murat, I have a question, and like to ask you about your opinion, because in the past we talked about it. So the most natural thing is to make a stick bow, you know, in Stone Ages or in very early days, or in some cultures even today, they make straight, simple bows from a piece of wood. And it's also the most affordable bow, you know. It's you don't need a lot of work, a lot of sinew and horn and stuff and so on. So maybe, I don't know, uh, where I don't know if all these cultures, and not especially the Turkish culture or the Turk tribes or so, if they all had these sophisticated high-tech bows, which are these Asiatic style bows, I like to call them. But maybe if you have to equip an army with a lot of bows, and you just need this army for, you know, one raid, one battle, one little war, maybe you wouldn't, you know what I want to say, no?
Well, in fact, in our previous interview, we also discussed about that. For example, you said that a bow would be more convenient in a semi-desert or steppe. But then I ask you why, for example, in another semi-desert geography like Australia, at all.
There's not a lot of woods, different woods you can try and so on. Yeah.
Well, first of all, the main reason of having a particular weapon is the raw material, if you ask my opinion.
Yeah.
Because one of the theories about the rise of the composite bow is the lack of trees with longer trunks. So if there are no trees like that you can harvest good long staves from, then you have to use a shorter tree with some reinforcement.
Let me interrupt you, Murat. Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Hear me? Yeah, but if you think about, since the Stone Ages, the people traded all around the world.
Yes.
You know, and there are lots of trees in Asia and also in Turkey and so on. So I don't know.
Well, that's true, but think about the steppe culture. There was some trade for sure, but they didn't have cities. They were nomads. So the concept of trade was different too. They were on the way of Silk Road, of course. There has been always trade, but it is not in the same concept because they were mobile all the time. They were moving. So that's why the raw material that was readily available.
And I also
animal matters.
And I can imagine, if you can, let's say, making bows out of nothing, you are not depending on the other cultures and tribes to make trade. So you can say, okay, we have no trees, but we can make nice bows without trading. So we are independent.
Yeah.
That's an
well.
Of course, the Mongols would have been able to trade some staves, no, you know, some wood stuff. For example, the Mongols.
It may be possible. So why they actually preferred having some sophisticated bows? It's a mystery, but its past can be tracked back to the 3rd millennium BC.
Yeah.
Yes, the first warriors with the composite bow and war chariots. The horses were not evolved yet to be able to carry a man because they were smaller, a little bit larger than a dog. So the horses were smaller. Therefore, they fought on war chariots, and they used the composite bow as a weapon together with the war chariot. And on a war chariot, of course, a shorter bow is necessary, more comfortable. But again, these are just theories. So, but I always believe that preference on a bow is usually a cultural thing, but the raw material also played a role in a geography in which the trade is not the same that we have now. Because later in the era of Seljuks, for example, they bought the bows from Syria. Syria was among their one of their counties, so they ruled Syria as well. But during the era that the Seljuk dynasty ruled Anatolia only, because the Great Seljuk Empire ruled Syria, Iraq, Iran, a very larger geography. But then later, the Anatolia, Asia Minor, was ruled by the same dynasty, and in this era, they bought their bows from Syria. So this is what you say. So the raw material as well as finished weapons can be imported, could be imported. They did, but not in this earlier era, as far as I know, just because they were mobile, no cities, nothing, they were not settled. So because of this mobile lifestyle, they had to use the ready material, the available material, and because they were herders, they already had animal matters. So sinew and horn, they had quite much. So
and
shorter trees. Yes.
And even if you think about the North American or the American Indians, in some places they had longbows, like the Cherokee and so on. They're living in wood, in forest areas, and the Plains Indians had also kind of horned and sinew-backed bows and so on, because these were these steppe warriors, and the other ones were living in a tree country. So that's true. Yeah.
And something to do with the climate too. Good example in America, because America is a big continent with different climate. So yes, well, it is not very important, very easy actually to have undiscussable conclusions about why a particular weapon was preferred. For example, I tell you something. For example, a English longbow was used much later. So the technology of composite bow existed long before, but they didn't prefer that. We could not claim that they didn't know that, because at least Crusaders, they saw the technology, but they did not adopt that. Maybe because of cultural reasons, because they didn't need it, because their warfare was based on defensive use of the bow, unlike the Eastern world, in which the bow was used in offensive practice.
That's one reason why I brought this up, because if you think about the English longbow, it's a very simple, easy to make weapon, very cheap to make. And an Asiatic or Turkish or Ottoman or, is a very high tech,
sophisticated
piece of weaponry. So it's, in my opinion, if I have the trees, if I have the woods, it's much cheaper. And it, like I know it, Murat, war is always about money. If you can supply enough men with weaponry, so you can do a raid or an attack or a war or so on. So it's the same today. If you have a cheaper produced, submachine gun, like in World War II, the first time they milled it out of full steel blocks, these submachine pistols, guns, and later then it was just folded tin. So because it was cheaper, like the Kalashnikov or so on, and it was the same back then. Yes. And that's what I thought. It's a very expensive thing, that kind of Ottoman or.
That's right. Well, during the steppe era, before the Turks settled down, it is it may be because of the availability of the material, as I said. But later in the Ottoman period, there is an article that I wrote together with Mr. Shinasi Acar, and we also introduced that. I mean, I gave a lecture in one of the festivals in Korea years ago. It was about the court report up to the death of the report. And in his workshop, there were some bows that the court decided on their value so that they will be sold and the money will be given to the to his wife and the others and to the state as well. So in this article, we discussed about two types of bows found in the workshop of this bowyer. One of them was called Egyptian bow, Yay-ı Mısri, with the old Ottoman term, and a Tatar bow. And the Tatar bow we thought was the Crimean Tatar bow because we know that they were manufactured and used in Ottoman capital Istanbul. So it was a preferred bow because it was easier to use with its longer length. So has similar features like the Ottoman bow, but longer. So anyway, the other bow, Yay-ı Mısri, was much more cheaper. I mean, the court stated prices for these bows, sixfold cheaper or something like that. So we thought that the Tatar bow, probably a Crimean Tatar bow, was a composite bow, while the other bow, this Egyptian bow, was a wooden bow, a self bow. So therefore, we wrote this article, which can be read on our website, tirendaz.com, with the title of Possible Use of Self Bows in the Ottomans. So the Ottomans might have used self bows or sinew-backed bows, because even if you don't put the horn to the belly side of the bow, both the production cost as well as the time would be reduced. So it is also possible. And I also found some evidence that some sinew-backed bows could have been used in the army, but I don't have strong evidence or rigid proof for that, because there is a bow called Çeka yayı or Çaka yayı among the bows sent to a castle in Hungary, or to a battle between the Ottomans and Hungary, maybe Mohacs. It's 1521-26. So I talked to the professor who had read the original documents in the Ottoman archive, and I asked him how the word exactly was, this Çaka or Çega or whatever, because the sinew glue is also called Çega in Ottoman Turkish. So that's why there may be some sinew relation on this bow, and directly be a referral to a sinew back bow. But the evidence is so poor, really so poor. But it makes sense to be suspicious about that. So because I agree with you, Peter, so it makes sense to equip an army with less money, because war is all about money. So especially at that time. So they could have been used, but all the evidence, I mean, strong evidence that we have about the bow they are used, about the technique, all the written sources and everything, and all the bows remained. They all are the composite bows, and the shooting technique points the thumb relief technique.
I had also the idea maybe these high sophisticated bows just the noblemen had, and maybe not the simple warriors, you know. I don't know. Because on the other hand, I thought about, if you think about juniper, you know, juniper wood.
Yes.
You can make very short bows out of juniper, for example, juniper. And you don't have to force your troops to have a 34-inch draw. If you just draw to your cheek you can also shoot a heavy arrow and so on. So I don't know. Seems interesting.
And think about that. If our theory about the availability of the material is correct, then in Anatolia, there were different types of woods, trees, I mean. So that's why in the Ottoman era, different types of bows, including set bows or sinew-back bows, might have been used. So we don't know that yet. But it is actually something we can discuss.
And you know, I like to interrupt you once more, because I think if these were very expensive and nice bows, you know, this composite bows, they kept them, and maybe the cheaper ones you wouldn't find them anymore, because you know they were not as expensive and not as displayable as and so on. We don't know. I don't know.
Possible. I just want to say something that I forgot to tell you when we were talking about this yay ilmistry or Egyptian bow that we found in the list of the inheritance of the Turkish warrior. It was this yay ilmistry. We also looked to the books about the Mamluk warfare and weaponry. So Mamluks ruled Egypt, as you know, and the Mamluks classify or categorize two types of bow. One of them is they call Persian bow, which we are sure is a composite bow, because they say that it consists of sinew, horn, and wood. And they also say or refer to another type of bow that is wooden bow, a sad bow. So Mamluks were familiar to sad bows. So that's why we thought, Mr. Shiraz Sercan and I, when we were writing or working on the article, we thought that this yay ilmistry refers to that bow which was known and used in Egypt. So it is very logical, Peter. So I agree. It is possible that these bows might have been used also. And as you said, there was no reason for anyone to save them in the museums or in the personal arsenals. So if they got broken, they could have been disposed.
That's, I'm not a scientist, but if you think kind of logic about it, you can. And we must agree, the first idea of a bow is a stick bow. You know, of course, all around the world, the first idea of a bow is you carve a kind of piece of wood and make a bow.
Yeah, but it's the same like with weaponry nowadays. The first rifles, they had this with this flintstone and front loading and whatever, and now they have an M16 auto machine gun. So it's the same. When you see, the bow was the weapon for the longest period of time, I think, before they used stones and whatever spears, but where you throw a projectile with a support item. And of course, every culture and every nation was trying to get the best, I think. So it's like now when you see the countries, oh, we have this rocket launcher, and then the other ones come up, but we have the bazooka.
Yeah, but I mean, there is
a thing too. Of course, then when you provide them for the army, you need to make.
But there is no best bow, you know. There's no best bow. Every nice working bow is equal to the other bow.
But you always look for what the material you have, you make the best out of it. And when you have horn and sinew at your disposal more than you have wood, of course you use this and you make the best out of it. And it has still a reason why these bows have this shape like this. They are shorter, easier to maneuver.
Okay, but gentlemen, I want to tell you something about that. Okay, every army, every state, every leader would like to have the best weapon, you said, Armin, but it's not the case all the time. I'll give you a very interesting, well, why? First of all, because the tactical use of a weapon is much more important than the weapon itself.
You don't win with the weapon.
Yes. Right. For example, during the conquest of Constantinople, Mehmed II, the conqueror, as we call him, the nickname of this sultan is Fatih, conqueror. And he was a very intelligent guy, a Renaissance scholar, as many experts have a consensus on. And he was good in mathematics, good in warfare, good in everything, could speak several languages, everything. This guy, who was just 21 years of age at that time during the conquest of Istanbul, he contributed planning of the cannons, and the two big cannons have been molded by a Hungarian cannon maker or bell maker, because as you know, the European bell makers became cannon makers. So these two cannons were molded, and he contributed in planning of this. He was such a clever person, and he was the first person in the history who thought that it would be better to place the cannons on the shore rather than
on the hill, on the fortress,
like a tower or something, because beforehand the cannons were placed like that. But when he placed the cannons to the shore, the cannonballs skipped on the water surface, and there was literally no way for the ships to escape, because think about that, it's the ship and the cannonball is skipping like that. Instead of just having a volley,
of course, the chance to hit.
He was just a very smart marshal, first of all. But the interesting point is he used big cannons. That was a modern technology at that time. And some also believe that he also used rockets, I think missiles or something like that. But he also used slings. And it was him who placed the slingers as well as the archers on the battlefield. So he personally placed these troops to where they should be. So think about the sling. It's a weapon that had an age of thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
So think about the Old Testament was written.
David and Goliath and so on.
So, and which means that.
And I like to interrupt you. And here you see, he was able to use a very cheap weapon, maybe a weapon a farmer boy, a herder was used to handle it, and he had an opportunity to surprise the enemy with this stuff.
I'm sorry, you said Abel or David?
He used a very cheap weapon. Maybe every simple herder boy was able to use first.
Yes.
So he could use auxiliary troops for this purpose, and it was a possible he surprised the enemies with these troops, with these special units of slingers, you know?
Well, not only because of the surprise that it could cause, but the reason the sling is a very inexpensive weapon. Very recently I gave a lecture and compared the momentum levels of different weapons, and I'll tell you something. A war bow with a draw length of 170 pounds, okay, launching a very heavy arrow, I cannot remember the weight at the moment, can produce a momentum of 4 point something Newton seconds, okay? And a sling that can launch a 70-gram stone with, I think, 65 meters per second or something, can produce the same momentum. And do you know what a 9mm parabellum cartridge generates as for momentum? It's just 2.8 Newton seconds. So if it comes to the efficiency of the weapon, the primitive weapon is not necessarily less efficient. It's not. So the tactical use may be so well adjusted or planned that it may be as efficient as a modern weapon.
And besides that, as far as I know, there are very, very few occasions in history where the superior weapon was the thing to win a battle. in most cases it was tactics, it was, you know,
Of course.
outnumbered and so on.
Yes, Peter, but what I meant is simply when you have the material, and of course you have then a bow build, and you tell him, or I would, as a rule, I would say, listen, we all have now this stick, can we make it in anyhow better? And then whatever, I gather the best bow builders, and then there's a listen, here we have now a challenge, a competition, who can build me the best performing short bow or whatever. This, I would do this as a rule, and then this, how would I come up with this invention?
Yeah, but there's the old battle between us, because I say a very well-made wooden bow, or let's say the other way around, a composite bow is not as much superior to a well-made stick bow. So,
well,
if you compare the making and the
let me make a fast comparison if you want. It is a superior weapon, comparably. I mean, there is a beautiful article of Adam Karpovich, so please read it. It is available on the internet. Up to a certain draw weight, it is approximately 70 pounds or 65 pounds for the Turkish design. So different composite balls with different designs may differ. But in Turkish design, up to the 65 pounds of draw weight, the energy efficiency of both bows, a well-made U long bow and the composite bow, are identical. But if the draw weight exceeds 70 pounds or 65 pounds, then the mass that you have to add to the limbs to generate this extra draw weight is more than in the long bow than you would add for the composite bow to generate the same draw weight increase. Which means if both bows are brought to 100 pounds of draw weight,
I understand,
then the composite bow is much more superior in energy,
but
or the percentage of energy that is transferred to the arrow. Okay. Other than that, the press-trained limbs, I mean the reflex, causes an energy storage more than that a straight limbed bow in the earlier stages of the draw. So this is also an advantage. So if the bow is very well made by using a very good U, then the energy efficiency is almost identical, but not the energy storage. So composite bow is superior in this case too. Third,
but is this making the real difference in warfare? That's the question.
well, as I said, even a sling may be a very efficient weapon if you use it tactically. So that's the point. Well, it is the same with any other combat weapon.
And I like to say, don't get me wrong, because I know that legend around the English longbow is nothing more than a legend. I'm a longbow guy, but I know it because it all resulted because the British surprised the French with the longbow, with the auxiliary troopers, with these farmer boys. They gave a bow and say, shoot as you can, and so on. And so I know it's a kind of legendary story.
I never underestimate longbow because it's really a very good weapon, especially if it comes to the ratio of benefit and expense.
Yeah.
So it's amazing, really. But again, it is about the tactical use, as you refer to between in the battles between French and English.
Yep.
The tactical use is much more important. And other than the energy efficiency and energy storage capacity, last but not least, I would like to say something, which is the shooting technique. So thumb release makes also a difference, especially when it's executed with a rigid thumb ring, because the initial arrow velocity is higher only when a rigid thumb ring is used. I have to say that if you use a bare thumb or just a leather protector, it is identical to that of a 3-finger release from the same length.
Yeah.
We measured them and a few times, so not only once.
I like to interrupt you. It's the same with the three finger. If you use a very stiff glove, you have a way better, faster release than if you have a very soft leather glove. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think it is all about the degree of rotation of the string from
how it slips away from the fingers. Yeah.
So anyway, this is also a parameter, a factor that makes the composite bow more efficient, technically, let's say. But from a tactical point of view, as you say, a very primitive weapon may be very effective, very efficient. Yeah. So it is the same for any other combat weapon. So and there are some very shallow comparisons on the internet. Don't go to a gunfight with a knife, for example. And there are experiments, so-called experiments people do with a rubber knife and with a pistol, whether you can stop an attack of a knife from that distance or this distance or that distance. These all of these are quatsch, as German said. So yes.
But I saw a video on YouTube. There was an American cop, a policeman, and the guy was holding the knife here like that, with the blade forward, and he ran to the policeman, and I think about 7 to 8 meters, the policeman wasn't able to get his gun out when the guy with the knife attacked.
But as I said, these are very illogical comparisons because a faster gunfighter could have done that, or a slower knife fighter.
Yeah. If you compare a bad gunfight and a good knife fighter, of course, yeah. But I like to say one more thing. I agree with everything, but if you say there's much stored energy or there's this and that, if this makes the difference, I don't know.
Well, it is about this, Peter. For example, you are a hunter tool. I know that. For example, think about these terminal shots if it comes to any weapon, okay? For example, if you shoot someone with a 30-pound bow in the heart, there's no way for him or her to survive, right?
Yeah.
But when it comes to terminal shots, then the more energy your weapon has, the better the result will be. So that's something like that. So I believe that the tactical use is much more important. So how you use the weapon on the battlefield. So the tactic or the commanding of the troops or the forces is much more important. But of course, it is quite entertaining to discuss all the.
Yeah, of course.
My weapon bites yours, your weapon bites mine, like these kind of things. It's
of course.
Discuss when drinking beer in the night of a competition, something like that. But in fact, the tactical use is much more important. For example, the composite bow cannot be separated from its tactical use either. So this fake retreat of the Turkish armies from the very beginning, from the steppe times to the sophisticated empires, they always use this tactic. So they pretend a retreat, and during this fake retreat, they were shooting even backwards, as you know, this famous Parthian shot. Yeah. And then they had a shape of a crescent. Then with the fake retreat, they got the enemy in and then surrounded it and destroyed, terminated. Yeah. So it is, and they did it so well. For example, I give you an example from the Seljuk era. Alp Arslan, Sultan Alp Arslan, who defeated the Roman emperor Diogenes. And Diogenes was a very successful general, having the title of strategikon. I think, yes, if I'm not wrong, strategikon, or anyway, a high-level general. Okay, and he was in awe of the tactics of Turks because he both fought them before, and he also had some minorities from Pechenek and Uz Turks in his army. But still, he was defeated with the same tactic because the ability of applying the tactic was so successful. It was much more better than the weapon itself. So this is why not the weapon, but the generals.
What I found out about strategy and tactics, and it's a lot about inside, you know, this art of war of Sun Tzu and so on. If you're ever able to do something the enemy is not calculating with, the enemy is not awaiting. If you can surprise him, because there was one story, they said think about Hannibal, you know, they can't go over the Alps and so on, and they did.
Same with the Mongols. Same with the Mongols. They surprised the enemy always because they could cross the deserts in such a short time that the enemy.
Or even the Romans with their you know, with their sandals. You know, all these German and Celtic warriors, they had no footwear. They were barefoot or had very not so sophisticated shoes. And the Roman, you know, the Roman soldiers, they had very nice, so they could march on, and they could surprise with their high how is it called, high speed of walking and so on. I interrupted you, but I want to ask you one more thing. There's, I don't know, you know, that the Ottomans 2 times sieged Vienna, and I don't know if it was the first time or the second time, but there's a kind of legend or, you know, story. This one time they stopped the siege because it started raining and the bows delaminated. Have you ever heard about that?
No, I haven't heard about that, but there's such a story which is very similar about a battle between Magyars and I don't remember their enemy at that time. So an instant rain started, and their strings got wet or whatever it was, something wrong with their bows. So because their main weaponry was the bow, they were, let's say, they could not function as they would have as an army, whole army. So it is told for the Magyars. I haven't heard
maybe
that.
they mingled it up, these two legends with Ottomans and Magyars and so.
But we discussed that a lot with Adam Karpovich because he has an experience of 35 years about making bows, and he's not only making bows, because he's a very curious person. He's experimenting a lot, including
Oh, he's gone.
No, you're back.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you, yes.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but the phone interrupted immediately. Could you get visual data?
All good.
Everything okay.
We see you and we hear you.
Yeah.
Handsome as usual.
The Elvis of archery is back again.
Yeah.
It's about the time limitation of Zoom, I think, right? Time
Pardon?
limitation, Zoom sessions.
Zoom. What is with the Zoom sessions?
There is a time limitation of Zoom sessions. That's why.
Not with our Zoom.
I pay for it every month. I think 20 euros or something. That it's not time limited. Don't worry.
Well, what were we talking about?
Good bow builder, and
Karpovich with the
about the strings and bows getting.
Karpovich is such a brilliant brain, really, and he even soaked the bows into water. Think about that. He's making a bow in almost 2 years, and he has such a scholarly curiosity. So he soaks the bows into water to see how it is terminated by water. So he believes that rain doesn't make much to bows because they are covered with leather or birch bark. But the strings. Okay, the strings might have been affected by humidity or rain because the Ottomans made the strings from raw silk as well as plant material. The interesting point is, what was the name of it? Rami. Rami is the name of the other material that they made the strings of. This Rami strings can be seen only in the examples in Dresden, in Germany.
Yeah.
So, in one of the articles of mine, which recently was translated to Japanese language as well, we had a Japanese member who was an Ottoman historian, a PhD student at that time, now a PhD, came to Turkey for 2 years and he participated in Tirandas. It was a great chance for us too, because he was a really brilliant young man. And Iku Nagashima is his name. Iku translated this article of mine, which is about the weaknesses and advantages of the Ottoman composite bow on the battlefield, including weather conditions. So how the bow behaved during bad weather. So thanks to Adam Karpovich, he really helped me a lot based on his experimentation, like this, soaking that into water, etc. So, and in this article, I also mentioned that this Rami, this alternative material, which cannot be seen here. By the way, here in Turkey, there are only 20-something strings available. None of the other bows have their strings on. There are 20-something strings in Topkapı Palace Museum's collection, which I measured and examined, by the way. So I have data about them. All are made of raw silk. So why another material was used in the bows, now saved in the European museums? I thought that Rami may be a little bit more resistant in humid weather, which is confirmed by the technical data. Rami is not only resistant, but also even tougher if it gets. So in these earlier legends about the bows of Magyars, for example, if they made their strings from sinew, then their strings might have sucked. So, but
I can't imagine strings made from sinew. I know they were, but I can imagine a useful string made out of sinew. But and I never believed this story of the delaminating bows and so on, because the warriors knew their weaponry, so they protected it, or they waxed the string, or I don't know. So there are a lot of ways to protect your stuff from moisture and weather. So I never believed this story, but I don't know.
Okay, when we come to, or if we come to these stories or legends, I'm gonna tell you something very interesting. Maybe you know that the totem animal of Turks, of ancient Turks, is wolf. Have you ever heard about that?
I don't got you now. Say it once more, please.
Okay. One of the totem animals of ancient pre-Islamic was wolf.
The wolf, this wolf.
Yes, exactly. Many Turanists do this gesture, referring to a wolf head, which I don't like. It's very dogmatic, but anyway, so you can't change people's minds.
It's an old symbol. It's like the swastika. It's an old symbol, but it was misused.
Well, yes. And it is mainly because of the legend of creation of Turks. The legendary ancestors of Turks have been guided by a wolf from where lived as slaves. So they melted a mountain. Probably it refers to their metallurgical know-how, because they've always been good in metallurgy. They were good metal hand forgers. They made metal objects, weapons, etc. And then they followed a wolf and got out of where they were. It was somewhere surrounded by mountains where they got lost and lived there for generations. This is something like that, a legend, okay?
Mm.
And this it is also said that something on the bows that is affected by rain, to avoid this, the night attacks of Turks was performed in full moon.
Mhm.
This is also a legend, because a full moon guarantees that there are no clouds and no rain will come.
No rain. Yeah.
And in the article that I wrote, that it's mentioned that this werewolf
It's also connected to full moon.
Of
Yeah.
course, that's why. Yeah.
horror literature of Europeans is based on this, that the Turks attacked in the night.
Are they real werewolves?
Yeah.
It was also, again, with no scientific evidence. But,
A legend.
yes,
But every legend always has a little bit of truth in it.
And if you think it's also connected to that Roman legend of Romulus and
Romulus and Remus,
with the
they built Rome, yeah.
exactly. There's also some researchers who believe that there is some connection between the early Turks and the Etruscs. So
yeah. And they don't know where Romulus and Remus came from, no? Maybe they were Turks too.
Yeah.
I see. You know, the Murat is a very big patriot. I see, but I like it.
me,
Yeah, of course.
no, in fact, of course, I am a patriot, but I'm not a chauvinistic person. I can say that for sure. And
No.
really against. I'm really against these pan-Turkish theories, because there are some people who will claim that everyone is originated from the Turkic race. So it is unbelievable. Some people claim that.
But maybe, who knows? Who knows?
No. It is, of course, a big lie, but I have to say that the world's history cannot be written without mentioning the name of Turks. This is true.
That's true.
Like Saracen is
Never.
very inaccurate.
Yeah.
If you
And you know, if you think about the stories in the Bible where the Garden of Eden, where the origin of life was, it was in this area in Syria, in Mesopotamia, in all that area, and where the Turks originally came from, I don't know.
Where did Noah's Ark end up? You know, on the mountain
In
Ararat?
Turkey, on the best place around in Turkey.
Of course.
Well, it is very interesting. A Hungarian friend of mine made a joke and said that some Hungarians believe that even Adam and Eve are Hungarians. So there are,
Of course.
Adam could be. Yeah.
but
you know,
but
I like to say something. At the moment, I'm reading an interesting book. It is a novel about World War I, and the backstory is true. So not the events are all true, but the core of the story is true. And if you think about the today's politics, it is very interesting, because the story of the book is the German Kaiser Wilhelm, you know,
Wilhelm II, yes.
yeah, William II, he wanted that the Ottoman Empire to join him in World War I. At the beginning of the war, they weren't connected allies, but some days later, let's say like that, and the German supplied an expedition. The guy, his name was Niedermeyer, a German guy, with some Austrians and Germans and so on, and they had the plan, like Lawrence, you know, in Arabia did, to make a kind of Islamic revolution against the English, to make a jihad against the English, So they sent these expeditions they were in Istanbul, and so I'm sure if you do a little research, you find something about it. And their goal was Afghanistan. So they wanted to connect all these Islam people to fight the English. Very interesting story.
The thing is, the Ottoman sultans owned the title of Caliph as well after 1517, when Sultan Selim I defeated the Mamluks, and they got this title from them. But this title has not been used efficiently, especially in the First World War. A very good proof is the Arabian Peninsula, right? Okay, the Arabs not only betrayed the Ottomans under the commandment of the English, but such plans of the alliance of German Empire and the Ottoman Empire didn't work either. And think about that, in the siege of Gallipoli, there were some Islamic minorities from India who fought in the army of the British, but there are some reports that they hesitated to fight the Ottomans. So, but of course they had to obey the commands, but hesitated, so they were not as efficient. But although they hesitated, they fought. So this title or this power, if it was really a power, was not used well, because the time changed. Even in the beginning of the 20th century, it was not like the 10th century or the 11th century. It was different. And
I also always like to mention this, because nowadays they always talk about Muslims are hating Christians and opposite, and so, and in history that's not true. It was never like this.
Everybody fought for power and
not for religion and not for hate or racism. They fought for land and for power.
There are incredible information harvested lately, very interesting. I really don't want to deviate too much from archery, but just to say a few words about that, a very recent book that was written by Professor Halil İnancık, a very famous Ottoman historian, Uğur Altu and Evgeny Ratushev. The latter one is a Bulgarian professor. They wrote this book, and the book was published after the death of Halil İnancık at the age of 100 or 101, something like that. And this book proves that after the invasion or conquest of Balkans by Ottomans, the local people cooperated with Ottomans, even in the military activity, because all the official historiography of the Balkan lands, when they founded their states after the First World War, like many others, okay, were these nation-based states. So they wrote their own historiography, and of course, based on lies. It was the same in Turkey, of course. We had a 20th century official historiography, but these new findings, based on the documents found in the Ottoman archives in Istanbul as well as in Sofia, prove that there was a cooperation. So it was not about the ethnic identity. It was not about the
religion or something. And you know, I mentioned this. They wanted to make a kind of jihad against the English, because the same was true with the ISIS. You know, the Americans gave the Muslim extremists weaponry to fight their enemies. Or if you think about the war in Yugoslavia, the Bosnian War, they gave that Muslim minority weapons and agitated them against the Serbs, because the Serbs are connected to the Russians and so on. So this is an old trick. I found out in this book, this is an old trick to use religion to say, yes, we are minority and so on.
Not use religion, to misuse religion.
Misuse.
I'm sorry, misuse. Yeah.
Well, yes. to be able to go back to archery. Armin, are you there?
Oh, it's fine. It's fine. You can. It's fine. I go sleep, and it's fine.
And no, I like to talk on. And it's the same was true, in my opinion, that Constantine connected the people with the Christianity because there were a lot of different tribes, and he just could connect them with a religion. And I think the same was true with Mohammed, because there were many different tribes and different, pagan religion, and so he could connect them all together. We are Muslim, and they said we are Christians, and so on. So it was a tool to connect different ethnicities and so on.
I'll tell you something. It is very physiological. Okay, there's a hormone called oxytocin, and it is related to feeling that you belong to something.
Yeah.
So belonging to a profession, belonging to a nation, belonging to a group of friends, belonging
to a tribe. Yeah.
Yes, or supporting a football team, belonging.
Yeah.
They all triggers your oxytocin discharge in the brain. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's all. What about that? It's really physiologic, and people who are really smart and evil, they can easily misuse it. It's not that hard. That difficult.
You can use it also for good, of course.
Yes.
And they knew, and back then they knew nothing about oxytocin, but they knew it works.
Yeah. And the problem is, people who misuse these are smart, but what is missing for them is the ethical values. So not the.
Yeah.
And that's why we cannot misuse that.
And there are also many examples of people using this. I say using, not misusing this, and making good things, and then get on a slope and turned into bad people.
Yeah.
Because success, and if you're getting too big and so on, difficult. We're all humans,
Yes.
Yeah.
That's degenerate, unfortunately.
I did a little study, on all that gurus, on that, on that sects, on that Jim Jones, and I know of this, a lot of these cult leaders, and they all started out as good people.
Yeah.
For example, Jim Jones, he was interracial in the United States. He supported the blacks and so on, and made a very open church, and it was a nice community. He started as a good person, and then it ended in horror. Because we are humans, and if you're getting too big and if you can do everything.
Do you know, Peter, a good system should also protect itself from being degenerate. So this is the last words I would say about that. So if a good system, then it has to have the features of being protected automatically from such misuse. Okay.
But once you have the right people in your misused, then it's fine. Like nowadays, media and politicians, then it's fine. Then you're not protected at all.
And I mean, you see today, sometimes it goes very slow. So you won't detect this. You won't see it. And when you recognize it, it's too late.
Yeah. No, even if some people tell you in the beginning what is going to happen, but you don't want to see it. But as you said, it's the Frankfurter Schule, or what did you say? That it happens in the schools and in the universities?
Yeah, the Frankfurt School, in the 1920s, this kind of Marxist guys and so on. And they said, we don't make a revolution, we make the slow march through the institutions. Like Angela Merkel.
16 story of success.
She destroyed the German Conservative Party. She turned it into leftist.
And she officially hated this party, but it was useful for her. So
well, left and right is differently defined in different countries as well. Sometimes I am speaking with my Hungarian friends, for example. There, because of their past, the left wing is defined completely different, and in Turkey is completely different either, because we did never have a proletariat. And interestingly, the left wing is here supported by the well-educated white-collar Turks, unlike it is in many other European countries. So
here too.
It is also relative. So it's relative. By the way, Armin.
Yeah.
What's the bow that you have behind? It's a recurve, right?
That's a bow I started shooting with. It's a compound bow. It's an early from Fred Bear, the brown bear.
The dark side of the force.
It has wheels on it, and it was simply for my.
Armin, what you switched to the dark side.
I know with this I started when I was 15, 16-year-old. This was the first bow I got in contact. Exactly this model, not this exactly one, but this model. And I started shooting, and this started with me, all this archery stuff.
It is the early design with symmetrical pulleys instead of cams.
Yeah.
So it's
a really early model from Fred Bear. Yeah.
A wooden riser, you see.
It's heavy, and it was even way too heavy for me at the times, and I ruined my muscles and everything. But it started my archery kind of career, as you want to say.
When we talk a while, maybe Murat says the Turkish invented the compound bow.
Well, believe me, there may be some around who would claim that.
An American of Turkish,
I'm happy for the Turkish coffee. I'm happy for the Turkish food. I'm happy for the Turkish tea. So I'm happy that you're quite inventive. So it's fine.
You're happy with the Turkish bow, right? A good performance.
The Turkish bow is fine too. Yes, of course. But I don't want to always talk about Turkish bow with Peter, because only a long bow is.
No.
I'll tell you something, guys. If someone is interested in traditional archery or any other traditional art, but it is so, especially if it comes to martial arts, it is also, of course, you're a little bit patriot, of course. But I'll tell you something. Comparing to many others interested in Turkish archery, I may consider myself very sterile, and I have been blamed for that purpose as well. And since I started reviving the Turkish archery in the early 2000s, I am feeling as if I'm swimming in a pool full of sharks, because nobody pleased, okay? Some think that I am an infidel, while some others think that I'm a fundamentalist Islamist. So nobody can be pleased. So that's what I can say, that I'm quite sterile compared to many others. But of course, dealing with these traditional things really moves something inside, okay? Plays the string of our hearts.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Murat, I'm sorry, I'm in talk.
No, I only want to say, yes, I understand.
Murat, I'd like to say something. I think, for example, for an Austrian, it's hard to be a kind of patriot in... Pardon? You hear me?
I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Now you hear me? You hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you repeat? Yes, I can. Can you repeat?
For example, for an Austrian like I am, it's very hard to be a kind of archery patriot because we have no archery tradition here. So it's easier for a Turk to be a kind of Turkish archery patriot. Yeah. But I want to say, you're not an extremist or a kind of absolute patriot, because I like to talk to you because, you know why? Because you're, in my opinion, you're searching for the truth, and so am I. And so I don't say the English longbow is the best one, okay, you say the Turkish bow is the best one, but that doesn't matter. You know, if I have a good argument against your theories, you discuss it with me and say, oh, maybe, and that's I don't know. I like to know everything with history and how it became and so on, and that's not patriotic. I see you are a kind of historian, and you're proud of your heritage, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay, and that should be allowed and not looked bad about the person. Oh, he's a patriot. Yes, he's a patriot, and that's good. It's my opinion.
Yeah. And regarding the best bow, it's the same like what is the best knife. And it always depends. It depends what you use it for. If you want to cut a tomato, you don't take a kukri knife as example. But if you want to behead a goat, you might want to have it. So it always depends. And the same with the bow too. And
what is the best gun?
Yeah, exactly. For what?
Yeah.
It's a personal preference. For example, technically, it is not possible to really identify the traditional archery as traditional archery. If you look at the traditional archery of the America, North America, because it's based on some bow technology based on 70s or something. So their traditional bows are nothing to do with real traditional bows. But,
Murat, we said it before in shows, you know, the term traditional archery just came into life with the compound bow.
Yeah.
When they invented the compound bow in the United States, the recurve and longbow archers said, we are traditional archers and you're not. And so if we talk about traditional archery, so we could say, okay, all our tribes, the Turkish tribe, the Austrian and the Germans started with a stick bow.
Well, yes.
Then in the Stone Ages or somewhere, no?
What I'm trying to say is it is not easy, not only to identify which one is the best bow, it is also almost impossible to decide what this or that bow should be called or named.
Yeah.
So like traditional bow, that and that. As you said, for America, after 1966, it was the year that the patent of the first compound bow was taken.
Yeah.
So I said 1970s. In 1970s, as you said, the others who were shooting recurves and longbows came out and said that we are the traditionalists.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about the Moritz and William Thompson's Witchery of Archery that was written in the late 19th century? They were using English longbows, although their know-how was based on the hunting tradition of the Native Americans, but they preferred the English longbow that had been brought with the English.
And just because Dr. Pope was a kind of English longbow enthusiast, and he wrote a nice book about it, so that was the kind of root. Yeah.
Witchery of Archery is earlier than Dr. Pope. So because of all these, people like me have the right to be a little bit archery patriot, okay? Because we have some strong, undisputable base, a brilliant part in our culture. So it's the same for Koreans, same for the Japanese, same for the British.
Yep,
exactly.
Again, being evidence-based and objective as much as possible, it's the way it should be. And I am, as I said, acquiring even enemies because I'm behaving that way.
Yeah, but these are stupid people. They don't understand what we're talking about, I'm sure.
And maybe calling it traditional archery is maybe the wrong term for it, because everything what is done over 2 generations is called tradition. So
and if you think
modern recurve is nowadays already a traditional, or a compound bow is now 50 years old, so it's a traditional bow.
If you think about archery in itself is traditional.
Exactly.
Well,
all archery.
Yeah.
the term tradition is also very much misused, Armin.
Yeah.
For example, some local festivals, I'm sure you can come across in Malta as well, but in Turkey there are many regional cultures, and there, for example, annual cherry festival or annual yogurt festival, and if it is done years consecutively, the fourth traditional cherry festival.
Yeah, of
so
course.
That's why
because it's of course every year. Yeah, we have a Nutella festival here. Yeah, you can't imagine.
Yeah,
of course. Yeah, historical art. Yeah, but it's not the right term either. But it's fine. But we understand. We understand each other, and there will be always critics, like
I've heard something very recently. The modern sport archery changed the name of the Olympic recurve to classical bow. Maybe you realized that.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
To what? To
classical bow?
Yes, it's not worth to know actually, but I coincidentally knew that or learned that.
Wow.
Because to call it Olympic recurve and the other one, the compound bow. And now they changed the name classical bow. Classic according to what?
Exactly, yeah.
And if you think about classic, it was in the ancient Greek and so on. This was the time of the classic, in my opinion. Yeah.
Or a classical car is whatever, some vintage car.
Yeah.
Well, what is classic? Yeah, exactly. Or classical music.
Yeah.
Or historical archery. Because there's another term used by the American archery enthusiasts, primitive archery.
Yeah.
So, pardon? How? Primitive archery. Yeah.
And they probably refer to that of traditional archery, at which they use pre-recurve and longbow era. I mean, meaning the modern recurves and longbows with center cut shelves and everything.
Yeah.
And if they any other bow with no shelves or wooden sinew back or whatever, they call it primitive archery. So it is also
they call it primitive archery and use Dacron strings and plastic nocks on the arrows. I know.
But this is also something that we have to have consensus on, because we just discussed that with Jürgen Jungmanns on Facebook. In fact, how traditional archery when you're using laminated replicas or all resin replicas. But I believe that as long as the shape fits, then you should be allowed to use these because of the ability of because of the ability of equipping newcomers with inexpensive equipment. So it is important. As long as they have the same morphology and similar characteristics. And they do have similar characteristics.
Yeah.
For many, it is impossible to tell apart without looking at the bow by just drawing whether it's made of old resin or horn bow. So there are slight differences.
Murat, for some 20 years, I was the president of an archery society here in my area, and for 20 years we made 2 3D tournaments a year. And as far as I can tell you, we had a kind of, a primitive class. It was kind of self bows, and recurve and longbow, and also a guest class with compound bows and so on. And the good archers in every class, except maybe the compound shooters with sights and so on, all the others have no sights. They are equal. So what I want to say is, for a good archer, it doesn't matter if it's a primitive bow or a traditional or a classic or you have to hit the target. And the very good self-bow archers were equal, like the recurve archers or the longbow or the traditional longbow archers, or how you like to call it.
Terminology. Yeah.
Even these categorizations are inaccurate. I think I for example, saw some other categorizations or classifications in the competitions in Poland and Hungary. which have been organized very well, really. They contemplated a lot about that, even about the classification, I'm sure, but it is not very accurate. For example, in Hungary, there's a class called hunting bow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what if I with the criminal Tatar? Well, hunting bow is very inaccurate, but they're really good people with good know-how. But these kind of things, I don't know. Maybe people like us should think, discuss, and maybe write about that, so that a new literature, new terminology will come out or will be created.
Mm-hmm. But there are big problems, because when I was the president of that society, there they called it horse bow, or that Hungarian style bows they came up with these bows. So they had limbs made of fiberglass, coated with kind of leather. And so I had to put them into the primitive class. They should have competed in the primitive class, because they had a very difficult bow to shoot. Mm. But I had to put them into the recurve bow class, because they had glass fiber limbs, So it's not so easy to judge,
Yeah. And even the naming, not only classifying or based on their ballistic capability, but the naming is also sometimes funny, like that you mentioned, horse bow, for example. In an American forum years ago, and the guy of European origin supported me when I was disputing that term, and he said my bows should be called laundry bows, because most of my shooting is done in the laundry of my house. So
exactly.
Horse bow is such a silly, but you cannot actually stop such.
But how you call them? Because it was a kind of a sample term for all these kind of Asiatic bows, shorter bows, and so on.
Okay, look, for example, Reiterbogen is based on the same thought, but is more accurate. But horse bow is not, because Reiterbogen or the cavalry bow, let's say.
But that is what they meant with the horse bow, of course.
Horse bow is completely illogical and inaccurate. But maybe it makes sense for us. For Armin, for example, he's a very frequently viewed YouTuber. He has to go on these terminology, maybe, because the more people hear the terms, the more people would embrace and accept these.
But you would get from, we say in German, from the hundreds into the thousands, because if you say you make a wooden bow class, just self bows, wooden bows. Okay, the next guy comes along and has a laminated bamboo bow. So it isn't a wooden bow, and it is a wooden bow, but it's laminated. Or the other guy has an English longbow with 3 laminations without. So where to stop and where to end and how to do it, it's very difficult.
That's why the ballistic features should be known well. So, for example, a laminated wooden bow is not too much different than a self bow in terms of ballistics, for example. There is no advantage.
But a laminated bamboo bow, it performs like a glass fiber bow, maybe.
No, I mean, if there is no shelf, for example, only the straight limbed may make a difference. Otherwise, there's no difference. Even a straight limbed CU back bow is not too much different than a straight limbed wooden bow. So these categories should be based on the capability of the bow, whether they provide any extra advantage to the user. So, and even the naming should be based on this. For example, the hunting bow, as the classifies it, doesn't make any sense. They actually refer to that kind of bow with shells. So I understand that. But it's not hunting.
You know, I think the Hungarians got this hunting bow from back then. We had a class in German. It is called Jagdrecurve, hunting recurve. It was a special class, and maybe they adopted it and said this is a hunting bow also.
Could be highly possible, because even this Jagd recurve is an inaccurate term, unlike the Reiter bow. Right?
It was a separation from the kind of Olympic recurve bow. So they shot the one piece and so on. These were the hunting recurve, and you know.
Exactly. So I do understand the idea behind it, but creating terminology is very difficult. In fact, so it should require serious scholarly work of different people from different professions and with multilingual know-how. This is very important. So
I have to laugh about it, Murat, because I'm imagining a kind of meeting where they fighting against these terminologies, you know. No, this is not a hunting bow. No, that it's not historically, and this and that.
But I use it for hunting, so it's a hunting bow.
Imagine Murat is out. Murat? Murat, you hear us?
Murat.
He even looks.
No, he looks away. You upset him with something.
No.
Murat? No, he's frozen now. Huh?
No, Murat, are you back?
Hello. Oh, he doesn't see us. Well, that makes sense.
Are you back?
Are you back? Hello, welcome back. Nice to see you again.
I said,
missed you.
I said, imagine a big room full of crazy archers fighting about the terminology. No, this is not a hunting bow. No, this is not primitive.
Of course, it's not the way it should be done. But when we write or when we talk on videos, then we may discuss about that too, and sharing our opinions and ideas together. Even this is a good occasion actually to just pull people's attention to this need. It's a need actually. So anyway,
was a nice closing word. I think, guys, we are already 2 hours.
We have been talking for 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. But we could listen to you for 10 hours. That's not a problem. You have such a big base of knowledge.
I really enjoy. Really. You know, you always have to look for persons you can learn something from.
I wonder why you talk to me then, Peter.
For me too, really. For me too. It was a great conversation, really. So we will repeat it.
Thank you very much. That's what I wanted to ask now.
I am grateful. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And I'm very glad to see you again, really.
Yes, of course. Thank you. It was a pleasure to talk to you, Murat.
Yep.
For me too, Armin. Thank you.
Thank you very much for watching, guys, outside and on YouTube. And if you have any questions, write them in the comments, and we will answer on whatever.
Yeah. Okay. And now, Murat, say goodbye in Turkish language.
Güle güle.
Goodbye is hoşça kalın.
Hoşça kalın, exactly.
Hoşça kalın. Okay.
Teşekkürler, Murat.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your knowledge.
Guys, have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Armin, by the way, you're Maltese?
I don't speak Maltese, no.
No, you don't?
No. I tried 2 times to learn Maltese, but it's not logic. I'm a German. For me, a language needs to be at least a little bit logical, and the Maltese language is not.
You're from Germanic family?
I'm from Germany, yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, good. So Maltese is a Semitic language, right? And like Arabic.
It's a little bit Arabic, so the counting is more Arabic, but then there is influence of Italian, and it's a mix of a lot of stuff. So,
just Sicily, right? Just
they're close together. Yeah, of course we were once rivaled,
and back then I'm sure it was Ottoman.
Yeah, they had their problems in the Great Siege. Yes, of course.
Okay, then I say Hoşça kal in Turkish and Auf Wiedersehen in German for both.
Oh yes, Auf Wiedersehen. Hoşça kal.